So let's go to the story. The murder of Zimbabwean national Elvis Nyathi in Diepsloot has brought xenophobia back into focus. Tensions between South Africans and other Africans have been simmering for some time now. Operation Dudu has been campaigning against foreign nationals, claiming it's taking action that the government isn't prepared to. Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi joins me now to discuss this very sensitive issue. Minister, thank you so much for waking up this morning. I know that we said here on eNCA, stay in bed, but thanks for waking up to actually have a conversation with us in this regard. Before we actually get into this conversation, Minister, you know, there's a soundbite that I'd like us to go into from the Defence Minister Diepsloot, who was speaking about perhaps even a very apologetic kind of stance when it comes to dealing with the issue of illegal foreign nationals in the country. Let's just listen to the bite that was shared by the Minister, and then we'll come back and then we'll have a conversation around that.
I have no problem with police keeping mum about the nationality of the offenders. But I think that sometimes we are too shy to say to people who cross the borders legally and illegally, who reside amongst us, who do not respect our laws, traditions and cultures, that we are fed up. That does not turn us into people who are, xenophobic. I make an example which sounds like nothing. When I entered Tanzania in 1976, I was wearing a miniskirt, and a miniskirt was outlawed in Tanzania. I could not leave the airport facilities until the ANC had found me a kanga to wear to respect the laws of the country. And in every country I have been, and in every country I continue to be, I make sure that I am on the right side of the laws. And that is all we are saying. The truth of the matter is that most of the syndicates are not run by South Africans. And we're too ashamed to say that in Diepsloot. What is happening in Orkney and Potchefstroom, we need to give a little closer look at, because it is syndicates who sometimes deal with matters which take away even the water supplies which is supposed to be routed to people. And then we blame the municipality. So we need to say, come stay with us. Yes, if you are legal. If you are not legal, please approach us for help. If you are in trouble, we will see how we help you. If we have to deport you, we will also not be apologetic about deporting you. But please respect us.
Yeah, you know, this was shared about in February or so with the Minister of Defence, Minister Motsoaledi, just speaking about perhaps even the way that South Africa's stance has been towards illegal foreign nationals and even the perpetuating of crime in the country. Do you think that perhaps at this point in time, South African citizens are tired? They're tired of sharing their sentiments. They're tired of feeling disenfranchised. They're tired of feeling marginalized in their own land and being victims of crime and saying, you know what, if you won't do it as government, we will do it for you.
Yeah, good morning, Faith. Good morning to the listeners and the viewers out there. Thank me for having me. Thank you very much for having me. I'm just worried. I heard you telling people not to get out of bed, but me, I was taken out of bed. But anyway, it's par for the course. Yes, it's par for the course. Look, Faith, what Minister Diepsloot is saying is in the law. It's nothing new what she has said. She's just emphasizing what has been said by people, even the United Nations itself, even the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee, the country director, who happens to be coming from Zimbabwe, by the way, Mr. Leonard Zulu. He has just left last month to Afghanistan, but he repeated many times that when people are in a particular country, they must obey the laws of that country. They must not do crime. And in fact, even in terms of the Immigration Act, if anybody is admitted legally in South Africa, but they commit a crime and get convicted, when they finish serving the sentence, the Minister of Justice will send me the names 2 weeks before they are released. And they get automatically deported just for having been in jail. So everything she's saying is in terms of the law.
Yeah. You know, as you're saying that everything she's saying is in terms of the law as well, but it does not say, especially around how perhaps government was late in acting actively and being proactive with dealing with the situation of, number one, our porous borders, corrupt officials that are stationed at our borders that are allowing illegal foreign nationals into the country, speaking significantly to the crime that is perpetuated by people that are undocumented. It's easy to commit a crime in this country if you don't even have fingerprints that are registered at Home Affairs. And simply because of that we've seen a culmination of it. Does government at this point say, actually, you know what, we take accountability and we take accountability of the fact that we've messed up or we could have done better?
Well, Faith, the issue of porous borders, we've never shied away from it. We've always spoken about it. That, yes, is true. Our borders are porous. And for your information, Faith, I've given the history of this thing, and if you allow me. During the apartheid era, you are aware that the borders were fortified by the army, every inch of it, the whole 4,772 kilometers around the borders. But also, even white farmers were given weapons. They were given farms in the first place in order to help guard the borders, and they were given weapons. And we even have electric fences. If you look at the electric fences in the Kruger Park, many Mozambicans were electrocuted. In 1994, Nelson Mandela then said, we are no longer at war with our neighbors. South Africa is no longer a pariah state. South Africa is now welcoming to other people from around the world. And so there's no reason to do what we're doing during the times of war. Unfortunately, Faith, when that happened, there was less focus on the borders. And exactly 10 years ago, around about 10 years ago, I mean to say, NICOG, the intelligence coordinating structure called NICOG, which consists of crime intelligence, military intelligence, state security, etc., they came together in their what they call intelligence estimate. They realized this problem, this weakness, we are saying this, that we've got a weakness at the borders. We put less focus on them. And so let's do something for the management authority to be established. Unfortunately, Faith, very unfortunately, and I concede to that fact, it took 10 years for Parliament just to pass a law to establish a border management authority, precisely because there's no agreement among South Africans on how the borders must be managed, whether we must just leave them, whether everybody must come in, whether we are one country in the same continent or one continent.
Sorry to interject there, Minister. You're saying something you're saying something so profound right now. What do you mean there's no agreement amongst South Africans about how to deal with the issues at the borders? Can you just labor on that a little bit? Why is there no agreement? Is there no consensus around, the issue of illegal foreign nationals? How are they documented? Where is the disagreement exactly?
If you go to Parliament and ask political parties, they'll tell you different stories. Some say they don't want any borders at all. For the whole continent. The continent must be one. I'm sure you have heard that. Others say, no, there must be borders. But if you listen at their emphasis, the borders are only for African migrants or migrants from the East. If they come from Europe and America, then they must be welcome. So there are these different, and others are saying, please seal the borders to an extent where you can hear the undertone is saying, seal them in such a way that even oxygen from the neighboring countries must not enter South Africa. So that's what I'm talking about. That's why even when the Border Management Authority Act was passed, after 10 years of that debate, even when it was passed, there are many main political parties who voted against it, but for different reasons. Some were voting against it, that we don't want you to do anything at the borders, just leave them. We don't recognize that they are colonial. Others were saying, no, the act you've put is not strong enough. You are just playing games. It's not going to seal the borders enough. So there was that confusion, but eventually the act was passed. And as I'm talking now, we've got a commissioner and 2 deputy commissioners, and the first group of what people we call border guards, who are going to be a uniformed, group, just like the police and the army. We are interviewing the first 200, will be deploying them at the borders, not to stop people from coming in, but to redirect them and say, you can't just enter South Africa anywhere. Go to enter officially through the port of entry. And we've got 72 ports of entries in the country. 11 of them are international airports, 8 are seaports, and 53 are land ports. And they say, please go and enter there so that we fingerprint you, we take you a photo, we know you have entered the country.
Yeah.
That's basically what the border is doing. And I concede faith that it's something that was not done before. We are starting to do it now.
Yeah, because, you know, you've got operations such as Operation Dudu, right? And I don't want us to labor on Operation Dudu in itself, because it's just an example of community members deciding to, you know, take the law and be able to implement the situation that we're speaking about, how rooting out crimes in the community. But I want us to actually listen to what the leader of Operation Dudu was actually saying regarding how they are intervening where government seems to be failing. Because the truth of the matter is, it's Operation Dudu today, it could be another operation tomorrow. But just have a listen to this.
Why what is happening in Alex is actually happening is because the grass is dry. So any spark, we know what happens. We've been through the July unrest recently. I mean, it's not even a year now. And we've been through xenophobic periods in our country. But what's important is we also need to understand the position of South Africans. Ordinary South Africans are in a very tight corner, and when they start to express leadership outside, be it with or without guidance, then this will be the result. So it's important for law enforcement, for government, for civic movements to all come together so that we address this issue at a national scale. We're still being caught with our pants down. We are not really addressing the issues for what they are. And that's why, my brother, you're finding the situation to what it is. I'm not happy with the township economy being shut down the entire day, because people are on serious medication. They can't get food, and therefore they can't take a simple pill because they couldn't get bread at a shop or whatever it is. But that doesn't make the situation right.
Yeah.
So if you don't want the chaos, you better make sure that we don't find ourselves reacting. We must start acting and start taking the responsibility to say that prioritize meeting with all spheres of government, with every single community. How do we move forward from this problem? Because it is a real problem. I said it, and I'll always say it. When South Africans stand up to express how they feel, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But when people are doing the wrong thing, it's not a problem. How dare we say that, do not respond, do not come up, do not rise, Operation Dudu, community don't rise because we have a fear that it might incite, might. We have a reality of South Africans as we speak, don't know what they're eating tonight. We have a reality where South Africans are unemployed, youth is unemployed in millions, when we have people employed in our economies. Yes, we have the room to share, let's share if we have something to share. But I have nothing, so how can I share nothing?
So this is just a typical example of one such a group that is deciding to solve it in inverted commas, right? So take matters into their own hands in response to what is happening on the ground in terms of the lived experience of the South African. Tomorrow it may not even be Dudu, it will be another operation. But Minister speaks significantly also around how there needs to be an intertwined conversation, especially when it comes to law enforcement. You know, my colleague and I, Morena, were talking about how, I think it was on Friday, a video surfaced of police officials actually wanting to know what an elbow is from somebody, from a local, because they were questioning his Tsonga dialect, and he had to be defended by another member saying that no, it's Malamulele, and that's why he couldn't know it, and he couldn't tell law enforcement at the time. Law enforcement decided to let him go because they couldn't hold him on anything. But also how these operations are conducted, how law enforcement comes into a party needs to be a bigger part of the conversation, lest we identify South Africans because of the language that they speak or because of a dialect of Tsonga. Because today it's Dudula, tomorrow it's something else, today it's an elbow, tomorrow you're going to ask me how to say hey, and I'm not going to know, and then I'm going to be mistaken for a foreign national. How do we respond to that?
No. There's no need for any dialogue. The law is very clear on what must be done, the Immigration Act. The incidents we are talking about, which was done by a few policemen, is quite unfortunate. It's maybe they didn't know. Immigration officials work within the law. We don't ask people where they come from or their language or their body parts. That won't help. There are many South Africans, even including myself, who don't even know all the languages of the country. There are many people from other countries who speak the local dialects, even more than South African themselves. So that's not what the law says. What the immigration officials do, Faith, and it might not be enough, maybe, is even in our annual performance plan. In this financial year that has just ended, we conducted 220 operations, meaning roadblocks, business inspections, etc., to look for documentation. And it's in terms of the law, and it's defined in Section 41 of the Immigration Act. In this new financial year, we've actually increased it more than twice. We're going to do 540 of such operations. When you do them, you ask anybody you come across, let's say it's a roadblock, you ask them for their documentation, whether they are South Africans or not. If they are not there, you'll obviously ask them about their date of birth if they don't know their ID number. You ask them about the date of birth and, of course, their name. In the Home Affairs Department, we've got a 24-hour operation center where the people on the roadblock or in the business premises or wherever they are doing the operation can phone, give the phone number, the date of birth and the name, and the people in the operation center will be able to check on the National Population Register for if you are a South African, or check on the NII as the National Immigration Information System if you are foreign national, or check on what we call VAS, Visa Adjudication System, if you are a tourist or you are on a business visa or a study visa and all that. So it's done scientifically and it's done legally. It's only that those police did not know, and it was very unfortunate. That's not how we conduct our operation. We don't need any dialogue because the law is very clear on how it should be done. All they need to do is to ask Home Affairs immigration officials. If immigration officials were there on that operation on that day, they would not have allowed what you said has happened to have happened.
Yeah, but it also says something about being able to speak to law enforcement so that they understand that they could possibly be violating the very same law that they're trying to serve and protect if they do not get their story straight. Because right now we're speaking about how this thing is being conducted, where immigration officers are supposed to be the ones that are actually assisting in that regard.
Yeah, we always work together. I don't know what happened on that particular day. Immigration, when we do these operations, we call traffic officials because they know the traffic laws better, they understand the issue of licenses. We call police for the same reason, and Home Affairs immigration officials. We even add labor inspectors because they know about employment laws and all that. So we usually do these things in unison. What happened on that particular day in Diepsloot is very unfortunate. I don't know how it could have happened, but we always do these operations together. There's no operation which is done by any one group because each one of them understands their own laws. And I'm repeating, immigration officials will have understood on that day. And after 2020, when I visited Diepsloot with Minister Aaron, we put up all those teams together. Even now, we've now put 25 immigration officials there in Diepsloot. They are going to stay there for 3 months. And after 3 months, we assess the situation. But we believe even if after 3 months we find the need to remove them to go somewhere, we'll still put 3 immigration officials in the police station there on a permanent basis to try and avoid the type of scenes that has emerged.
Okay, let's go into solving mode. So you're speaking about how you're going to be tightening up the borders. You're going to institute law enforcement as well at the borders. When can exactly we expect this to happen, Minister? Because you and I are having a conversation, you know, and it's what, 24 minutes after 8 o'clock? It does not mean that somebody's trying to cross the border to come into our country now. So when do we have a set date for when this will all be implemented?
Faith, it's not an event. It's not an event, it's a process. Let's look at how the borders were managed up to so far. At the borderline, there are two areas at the border which I need to define. Firstly is the borderline. That means the demarcation line between us and neighboring countries. Sometimes it's a natural border like a river or a big mountain or something. Other times it's just a fence or an imaginary line where we know that this country stops here and the other one ends there. And so that's where the army has been. But then at the ports of entry, that means the gates which I've mentioned, and I said there are 72 of them, well, 53 on the land. That's where most of the problems are. We have got immigration officials there who allow entry, movement in and out. But we also have agricultural officials about agricultural produce, environment officials about fauna and flora, but we also have SARS on the side of customs. We have got health on who must come in with what documentation for health and what disease and all that. So all those were working in their silos. The Border Management Authority, which has been established, is going to bring them together under one command. And in terms of the act, 9 ministers are going to be responsible for the borders. And they are going to meet, they've already met twice, by the way. They are going to meet 4 times statutorily per year, or as required. Is the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Police, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Transport, Finance, what you call economic development, the Minister of Agriculture and Land, and the Minister of Environment. All of those ministers are and the Minister of State Security, of course. They are named by the Act as having to be a sort of a board or interministerial committee that is elected by the Act to sit and make sure that things are happening harmoniously at the border. So at the moment, the Border Management Authority, the people who are going to work there are going to call border guards. So you'll have the army, you'll have the police, but you'll have border guards in their own uniform and their own emblem. We have already bought them 25 Land Rovers. We have already bought them the uniform. What is left is branding. We have to follow the law because an emblem must be registered with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And they have to do a public, what you call, participation process. They are just about to finish it. If I'm not mistaken, in the next week or so, they'll be giving us green light so that we can start branding. And then we are busy interviewing the first group of 200 border guards. When we are ready, we'll launch it officially, Faith, and we'll invite you.
Yes, I would like a personal invitation to that so that, Minister, we can actually find a way of salvaging this issue when it comes to our borders. But another one is also around our bilateral relations, right? And especially our relations when it comes to the SADC region. What is being done to actually perpetuate these conversations amongst our neighbors, right, as well as leaders, officials, political heads within our neighbors about how is it that their nationals are coming into our country for either economic participation or running away from whatever it is, for whatever reason? How is it that they're coming into our country illegally so? Because in order for one to leave a certain country to come to another country, it says something about the bilateral relationship that exists between the two. So what kind of relationships exist with the likes of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Botswana, that will say, listen, guys, let's find a way of managing even the way in which our people relate with one another, given the situation that South Africa finds itself in?
Well, let's start with SADC. I'm sure you are aware that there are regional blocs. Our regional bloc is the South African Development Community, which consists of all our neighbors here in Southern Africa, 15 countries from SADC. SADC has got what is called an organ on politics, defense, and security. Ministers of DERCO or Foreign Affairs, ministers of police, ministers of state security or intelligence services, ministers of Home Affairs, they all belong to that organ. It discusses these issues, Faith. But the problem you are mentioning is a socio-economic problem of economies. It's about the economy. Many of the people who come here, yes, are economic migrants, but we regard them as asylum seekers and refugees most of the time. But quite a number of them are not refugees. They are just economic migrants. People are looking for better opportunities because the economies on the province, on the country, on the continent are not doing very well. Many of them believe South Africa is doing very, very well and it can accommodate all the economic problems of the continent, which is not necessarily true. That's why, Faith, if you check the Immigration Act, which was enacted in 1998, it was really based on a background where the whole continent was democratizing. Countries that never used to have elections on the continent were now starting to have elections. Countries where a ruler could rule forever were starting to prescribe terms, and that you can only have 2 terms. They were coming with constitutions, and everything was looking fine at that time. And at that time, in 1998, only 11,000 people came to South Africa looking for asylum or refugee status. The number kept on increasing and varying. In 2006, it was 53,000. But all of a sudden, in 2008, the figure jumped to more than 200,000. And while the system was still shocked, the following year, it jumped by another 227,000. What was happening at that time? The economy of Zimbabwe was collapsing. So it had nothing to do with asylum or refugee. It was economic migrant. But because in the United Nations Convention of 1951 or in our Refugee Act, it says nothing about economic migration. When people come there, they quote the Immigration Act that I'm running away, and many of them are even made to memorize the reasons that allow a person to cross a border illegally without the document. Reasons that are mentioned in the United Nations Convention of 1951, which has been ratified by countries in 1967. But of course, South Africa, it only ratified in 1996 when we became a democratic nation. So many people know that, and they say, I'm a migrant, I'm running away. And we found that most of the time, there's no truth in that. This is about the economy. And I accede to the fact, concede rather, Faith. Many countries wouldn't like to agree in a meeting that the economies are feeble, that they don't want to take care of the people. They wouldn't. They will blame South Africa for not being able to cope. That's why now South Africa has been labeled xenophobic when people are complaining about economic problems. What you are seeing on the ground, Faith, I mentioned it many times, even in in an article which I penned for City Press, that I don't think this is xenophobia. It's poor people fighting for meager resources on the ground.
Yeah. Because
economies are not very well on the continent, and people believe the economy of South Africa is doing very well. And you know, at the present moment, it's not. Around about 2006 or so, it was doing very well, but not now. And that's why people have to struggle, fight each other for resources.
Yeah. You know, Minister, and I hear your point around how people will actually move to other countries for better economic opportunity. But surely South Africa must be able to go back to those countries and say, listen, as it is right now, South Africa is dealing with socio-economic realities that our own nationals are struggling to contend with. Never mind the COVID-19 pandemic that has further exacerbated the situation. Can we find a way of working together so that we do not have an influx? And I understand that they are quoting even immigration acts, but is it no way of being able to speak to them and say, can we avoid an influx where we find that our country cannot capacitate people any longer? You know, Minister, there was a study done that, unfortunately, illegal foreign nationals in South Africa, it's very hard to track. Nobody exactly knows how many illegal foreign nationals are in the country, right? And that in itself says a lot, and it's a big problem, and it leaves room for exploitation. Is there no way of being able to go back to those countries and say, guys, we are dealing with the national agenda right now. Our people right now are buckling under the socio-economic pressures. Let's find a way to avoid an influx. You play your role as whatever country, we'll play our role as South Africa.
We do, Faith. As I said, the Border Management Authority, the act was passed last year, or 2020, if I'm not mistaken, but let me say last year we chose the Commissioner of Borders, who is Dr. Masia Pate. In that he was appointed in November. In December, we appointed 2 deputy commissioners, one for corporate affairs or corporate services, and the other one for operational services. They've been meeting with the neighbors. I also met with them from 2019 to inform them about the incoming Border Management Authority and one-stop border post. When you meet with leaders, they won't deny, they won't say, no, we're not going to cooperate. They'll say, yes, we agree, we'll cooperate, but nothing happens. Look at the bridge, Faith. The army there has reported times, and I've said it publicly, that sometimes they say the army will report, South African army will report that they've seen their counterparts in Zimbabwe helping people to cross illegally for money. And they said the army generals have been meeting across the border, and they all agree in a meeting that, no, this must stop, but it never gets stopped. Or they simply don't agree that they were participating in that. In fact, in January, when I went there, the army official on our borders warned me that, Minister, if this issue is not resolved quickly, there is a chance that the 2 armies might find themselves shooting at each other, because we see them across the river when they are helping these people. They even named those operations, they said, is some form of roadblocks, where they are doing it for money. They're not doing it for defense or securities. It's simply for money, unfortunately. But they won't accept in a meeting that one of them has done something like that. So when the army bosses meet, there is an agreement, but the things they agreed on simply don't happen. Those are the problems that we are faced with. But the Border Management Authority, now that is there, the commissioner is at the same level as Commissioner of Police, but is going to be staying at the border forever, because permanently, because the Commissioner of Police has got the whole country to take care of. So that one will be taking of the borders. They won't tire to meet our counterparts. We'll keep on talking to them. But I just want to show you that we do. It's not that we are keeping quiet. We do. Some countries cooperate, others do not. For instance, I'm sure when I at the borderline is 4,772 kilometers, the biggest portion of that is 1,500 kilometers with Botswana. There are no problems there. We have never had any skirmishes or any army complaining. The next is between us and Namibia, which is more than 900 kilometers. Same thing, we don't really have problems there. But when you come to the smallest portion, which is about 240 kilometers with Zimbabwe, you do experience most of these problems. So the neighbors don't behave in a similar manner. There are those where there's no problem at all, but there are those with a big problem. And Zimbabwe is one of them. And because of what? Since the economy collapsed in 2008, we've been experiencing these problems.